Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Baka podcast.
Baka.
It's amazing how every time you open your mouth, you prove you're an idiot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Baka. We are an anime podcast. Every 2 weeks, we come together on this podcast and we talk about anime that we've recently watched, like we're a book club, and then turn the conversation over to you. And it turns out you were the reviewers the whole time. That was the switcheroo. We recently watched Great Pretender, and to talk about it, I'm going to need a little help from some old friends. For those who can't see, I put a lollipop in my mouth. All right, first off, we have the hacker of the crew, second most wanted hacker in the Northern Hemisphere. He once helped steal the Declaration of Independence. Neo refers to him as the Other One.
Ooh, I like that.
He also claims to be the true creator of Napster. His name is Jeremy. How you doing, Jeremy?
I'm doing good. Trying to remember what Napster is, though.
I was about to say that's not a reference for our younger viewers.
Don't ruin the bit. It's from the Italian Job.
Oh, okay. I'm doing pretty good. Been very busy this week between school and work and whatnot, but I did get a chance. There was a coupon that was going to be expiring that I had for Epic for $10. You know how Epic is always trying to push games and stuff off on you. So they gave me a coupon a while back. And I thought, what do I want that I really don't want to spend any money on? So I grabbed Hades from Supergiant Games, and I gotta say, that's a really good game. I had a lot of fun with that. So I played that for a handful of hours. I did eventually get out of Hades, of hell, but
don't you
only
have to get out
once.
multiple times? Yeah, isn't
Yeah,
part of it like
I got out the first time. Yeah, I failed every other time since then. It was number 27th attempt. I got out, and I think I'm on like 39 or something. At this point, I've just decided, you know what? I'm just going to try to max out everything and then see what happens. But maxing everything out actually like increases the difficulty in some ways, because you have modifiers you can put on your runs to actually get access to resources that will allow you to upgrade your weapons. And so when you put those modifiers on your runs, it makes the runs considerably more difficult, and you sometimes have to stack a few. So it's been very painful, but I love it. It's great.
All right, the other member of the crew, the muscle of the group, wears lots of gold chains, has a mohawk. Women love him. Men aren't really that concerned with him. He likes to pity the fools. He's afraid of heights, but a sleeping pill and a glass of milk, and you get him to fly on anything. It's Jason.
Nice.
how are
Mohawk
you?
was a good touch. Doing fantastic. I'm sure you don't want to hear about my Minecraft adventures, so I'll tell you about my Rocket League ones.
I'm good for either.
Nice. Short version, I made it to the Dark Star of Aurelia, which was much more of a pain than I thought it would be. Anyways, yeah, Rocket League's been a blast. I'm not much of a arcade player, but man, the competitive spirit just rises in me every time I pick up the controller. I actually got to dust off like this old Bluetooth controller that I bought probably in 2015, and my new PC has a Bluetooth a receiver on it, so I was able to just pair it and good to go.
I've been playing with him, so I know all that already.
So I have Rocket League. I got it when it was free, but how does it play with the mouse?
You can play with mouse and keyboard. It's
Not great.
it's a little difficult because of the analog nature of how you drive.
I've been hesitating for that reason. My controller's busted, so I don't want to get another.
You know who else's controller is busted? Troy's Hotas. I'm really sad.
I had to take it back. I played Squadrons on the controller one time. I got like 3 kills, and it was not good.
Didn't feel good.
Need the Hodis back, and I love that game so much, and especially they fixed everything. Anyway, back to the bit. And my name is Troy. I'm the brains of the crew, even though I don't quite think things through. So Halloween has come and gone since we last recorded, and so I've watched a lot of scary stuff, done a lot of scary stuff. I finally, my daughter made me sit down and play Doki Doki Literature Club. Finally got to experience that ride. I watched a lot of scary movies. Probably one that stands out was Trick or Treat, which was actually a Halloween movie that was actually scary, but it had a lot. It's like mini stories that all combined together. It was really cool. But the one I really want to talk about is I just finished playing with my family. Little Hope, the Dark Pictures anthology. It's the sequel to Man of Medan, made by the same people who made Until Dawn. And so it's basically they're horror, choose your own adventure games with a lot of quick time events. You choose how you want to react to other characters, and then it tells you a story as you go along. And what they did is they made it so they call it movie night. Everyone could be in the same room, and you pass the controller around as it switches from different characters. So, I get assigned a character at the beginning, and if your character dies, they just die, and everyone can die or everyone can live based on your own choices or other characters' choices. I had a character die. My daughter got me killed, and I was just like, well, that's the game, and you don't really play it to win. You play it to get the story. As far as it was scary, it was fun to play. It's a really fun experience. I'm definitely getting the third game that they're going to come out with. Story-wise, I have never been that frustrated with an ending and that unsatisfied. I was very upset with it. The game is even better than Man of Medan. Still not quite as good as Until Dawn, but the monsters were scary. There was jump scares that we were screaming. It was great. Got to the end and I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
Was it the ending that you happened to get because of your situation, the choices you guys made, or are you talking about the general ending of the story?
So we got the good ending, but we also looked up the other endings. But the twist of the ending is the same no matter what. It's just the fate of the characters is different, and it's that twist that was that absolutely does not fit first the prologue that we saw, and second of all, it really invalidates a lot of the. It was not. It's rough. I said, still in for the third game. The experience was fantastic, but if the plot is what really matters to you, that is definitely going to have a hindrance to people playing.
Is it still that same narrator dude?
Yes.
Yeah, he's just got this air of I'm going to tell you a horror story, and I love it.
He's great. Like I said, I'm still in, and the experience with my family, my daughter screaming out loud next to me because of a jump scare, no other game is replicating that right now. They are doing a very unique thing, and I love it. Please hire a different writer or more writers to just kind of look over. That's all I'm going to say. All right, let's talk about our anime. We watch Great Pretender. It is a con artist anime that appeared on Netflix. It was my choice. I'm a huge heist and con story kind of guy, and I knew that it wasn't really these guys kind of thing, but I made them watch it anyway. So we're not going to be doing season 2. We just did season 1, but we're going to talk about it, go through the stories, go through the plots. But first, in our non-spoiler section, Jeremy, tell us, what did you think of Great Pretender?
I thought it was really interesting. I don't have a real problem with heist movies. I just sometimes kind of find them a little bit boring once you get an idea of who the characters are, that they always succeed, and somehow you that in the end the heist is gonna go off.
Very formulaic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm always looking for situations where the heist can really surprise me with the directions that it goes. And it didn't do that for the most part, but there certainly were moments here and there that I got surprised and I was intrigued. And so those moments stand out as high points for me. I like that. I got to know the characters really well. There was a lot of episodes here. It was 14 that we watched, which is, 2 more than we usually do. Right. And so that was a lot of time for development. So I'm not surprised that we got to know them a little bit better. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. I had quite a bit of fun with it. More fun as the episodes went on. For the first 5 episodes or so, I was a little bit bored, but I had a lot more fun in the latter 2/3. So yeah, I'd say if you're intrigued by heists, go get it. Yeah.
All right, I'm in. All right, Jason, what do you think?
I'll have to say the first two arcs were kind of boring for me. It's not that the characters were bad or the heists were uninteresting. I guess I just didn't care about the characters till near the end of the second arc. Because it was a lot more focused on how they were going to be conning people instead of the actual characters themselves. Which is fine, especially for the formula that they're going for. But because of that, I didn't find myself enjoying it till I got near the end of the second arc and into the third one, which the third one was really good. But it was all right. I had fun with it.
Okay. Much like I kind of knew I would, and I'm very, like I said, I very much love heists and con movies. Very biased, so keep that in mind when I'm giving my opinion. But I really loved it. The first episode hooked me. I was into the twist. Even there were twists that were predictable, but then there were some that weren't. It is mostly formulaic. I really liked mostly what they did with their music. There was some scene transitions that felt really sudden, and that's probably my biggest complaint. Is that sometimes it just felt like it jumped randomly through the story without giving us any context clues that it had jumped. But for the most part, I think it does a really good job of letting its characters breathe. That 14 episodes definitely helps. It uses time skips, and that really helps give this world and these characters breathing room to develop. I for the most part loved it. All right, let's talk about the OP and the ED, and I might need to not listen to you guys. I'm kind of in love with them, and I don't know if I want to hear bad things. But no, you go ahead. You go ahead. I'll go ahead.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I wasn't a fan of either. Okay, so the outro I really didn't like. The intro was okay. Definitely felt like a 90s heist show. And it had that, cool jazz to it, and it was boring.
Yes.
Jeremy, what'd you
Yes
think?
to everything. Yes to everything Jason said and more. You see, for me, it was not cool jazz. It was ear screeching, horrible, beat my face into the wall, scream and run away jazz. Oh God, horrible.
I didn't mind the music. I thought it was fine.
God, I just
I didn't
wanted
think
to
it was
rip my
great,
ears
but I
off.
thought it was fine.
Oh,
What about the ending? What did you think of the ending?
For the outro, it was fine. It was silly, but it was fine. Like, okay, a while back before we started watching this, you sent us a video of Freddie Mercury actually performing this and said, here's a hint about what we'll be watching next. And so I watched that and seeing the Cats do it, I don't know, it wasn't good enough. Like, I wanted the Cats to do it better. Like, I wanted the Cats to be drawn better. I wanted them to be more interesting and everything. I don't know. I guess I got my hopes up. Huh?
I thought the cats were dumb. I didn't like the way they were drawn.
I did too.
I didn't like the art style.
Way that they made the cats was dumb. Like, I thought the idea could have worked, but it just didn't seem like it was executed well to me.
I'm gonna say something really unpopular here.
Oh God.
Okay.
I don't like Freddie Mercury.
I don't either.
Oh Jesus. I apologize.
I actually, when I saw that video that you sent, Troy, I actually thought this is a joke, right? Like, this is somebody doing a joke version of the Freddie Mercury song. This is an impersonator, right? And then I realized at the end of the song, no, that was the real one. Okay.
I clicked on it and I was like, oh, it's Freddie Mercury's Great Pretender, and I closed it.
Click.
Troy, what did you think of the outro and the intro?
Let's start with the outro. Just so you know, they're animating Freddie Mercury's cats. Freddie Mercury owned a lot of cats. Those are actually his cats, and the main cat walking around was his favorite cat. The whole thing is homage to Freddie Mercury. And when was the last time an anime used an American rock song for intro and outro? I absolutely love that. I think probably JoJo, but still, I mean, JoJo does a lot of rock references. And Freddie Mercury, I think, is one of the greatest rock stars of all time. Queen's fabulous. So I was super digging it.
It just clicked all the boxes for you.
It did, which is why I even shared the clue. I shared that clue mostly internally because I was like, I want them to get the ED when they come to the ED. I want them to get that the cats are Freddie Mercury's cats are doing Freddie Mercury's music video, and that's weird for a Japanese animation studio to do, and I'm totally into that weirdness.
I still didn't get it because I didn't know they were his cats. I just thought they just arbitrarily decided to make them cats.
Just random cats.
Yes.
The intro. You should also know that I love jazz. The music had a very Cowboy Bebop feel to me, and I love the way it builds to a crescendo, which mimics the very cons that we're going to watch. That start out slow, and then they build frenetic, and you come to the crescendo, and it worked out. And matter of fact, they actually play the intro song, the crescendo itself, whenever the heist hits its crescendo. That music starts playing. So they're like in parallel with each other, and I think that worked very cool. The animation also reminded me of like how Fantasia used to use music with animation. I'm a big fan of the Fantasia movies. I used to watch them with my baby daughters when they were first born. Okay, so I had a lot of personal attachment to the intro and outro. They definitely work for me. I didn't skip them a single time. I'm sorry they didn't work for you guys, but you're absolutely wrong.
At least we're clear on that, Jason.
Well, I will say this before we get going into our spoiler section. The scores, and so even the jazz music at the beginning and the scores, I thought were great picks. And also, like, during the like more emotional parts of the backstories, like that music that they would play, I thought was fantastic. And that jazz music worked really well with the crescendos of the heists. I did like the music.
I was in the second arc, third arc. I agree. First arc,
I couldn't stand the first arc music.
I get why they chose rap there because of the location and the subject matter. I 100% understand that it fits. The music usually fits the locale and the heist, but yeah, that music it almost was too loud.
That wasn't great.
Yeah.
It wasn't the type of music either. It was just the way they've tried to fit it in. I didn't feel like it clicked with the scenes it was playing with.
Me. Tanya started watching the first couple episodes, and she checked out after episode 2. She's like, "Nope, you're on your own. I can't stand this music. I can't stand the intro and the outro. I can't stand this character." I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah, I watched the intro once, and that was it for me.
Oh.
Thank you, Netflix, for having a skip button.
Matter of fact, it was a race to the controller or to the remote every time to hit the don't skip because it auto skips the end credits. I was like, no, I must see the cats. All right, let's go on to our spoiler section now. So, spoiler for the plot, the characters, we're going to go into all of that. If you have not watched it and we have either convinced you to watch it or not watch it, it's up to you. Know that everything will be spoiled after this moment. So, everything that's on you now. So we start with Great Pretender. Usually the arcs start with the end of the first episode is shot from it. So this is a man hanging from the Hollywood sign by his feet and screaming for help. But then we come to our story proper. We see an elderly man trying to sell to an elderly woman a water filter. She's like, no way. And then so she makes a call to have a young water inspector come, and he's checking her sink. And he's like, yeah, it's mostly okay. It's mostly healthy. And so she's like, I have grandchildren. That's not good enough. I'm going to buy a water filter. So she buys a premium one from him. And we find out this has actually been a scam by these two characters. And that had been thought up by the young guy. His name is Makoto Edamura. A lot of the characters call him Edamame because they have trouble pronouncing his name. One thing is, all these characters are like different nationalities. And the first episode starts with everyone speaking their native language and having their native accents. And then, at least in the English dub, about halfway through the first episode, it just says, we're not doing that anymore. Just so you know, pretend it's still happening, but we can't keep this up. So everyone just, in the English dub, just switched to a normal English speaking accent.
They did the same thing for sub. They just switched to the standard subtitle and standard voice
speaking
actors.
Japanese.
Yeah, they did switch back for small portions in the third arc of French, but that was it.
Yeah, yes. So this is our main character, Makoto Edamura. Jason, what do you think of him?
He was all right. I I found him frustrating to watch throughout this whole thing, because he had this persona of being the greatest con man ever, but then he ditches that because now he wants to lead a straight and narrow life. I think it probably would have been better for the show for him if he had then turned around and embraced it, because he goes throughout the rest of the anime doing just fine as a confidence man. He was also frustrating some of his decision making, but I did like his relationship with Abigail and how he continued to try to like break her as far as like her walls that she would put up. And no matter how many times she would basically tell him to just crawl in a ditch and die, he would keep trying. I found that endearing, but he was okay as a protagonist. I think I would have made some different decisions as far as storytelling with him, but it was fine.
I'm kind of in the same boat as you are as far as like seeing those two things clash, where he starts out in the very first arc as being like, "Hey, I love conning. I'm the best con man in Japan," but then for the entire rest of this season, he's trying to go straight and not be a con man, and that I think would have been better. I want to go a different direction with it. I think it would have been better if he didn't start out as I'm the best con man in Japan, but instead started out as somebody with a history of trying it and failing and already trying to go straight and then being swept up into this. Because I think that would have made the rest of his attempts to go straight feel more anchored to the character. Like he was still the same person that we were introduced to. This just kind of seemed like, well, the person we were introduced to didn't have a clue what he wanted and was just being impulsive and saying things in every direction.
So you don't find that true even with his backstory, or is it because of where we get introduced to him?
Just because of where we get introduced to him. We do get some of that backstory later, but the first episode is just him talking about how great of a con man he is.
I disagree a little bit. I think if we kept the first and second arcs the way they were, but then in the third arc, he kind of embraced being a con man, but he still had a good heart. At heart, he wanted to be a straight and narrow, but like in his brain, he knew that this is the best thing he's good at. I think the last arc would have played off a little better, especially him like diving into, I want to help this, a little boarding house.
I could see it either way, whether it like starts at this peak of I love con, I want to be con, then dips down, comes back up to him reaching that arc of like, yeah, I'm accepting it, embracing it, or starting from the bottom of being like, yeah, I don't really like it, and then just slowly creeping up to it. I could see it go either way pretty effectively, but something other than what they did.
Yeah, because I think the gag of him always getting pulled back into cons unwillingly is going to get old real fast if they keep going with that in season 2. Because I got a little old with it with the third arc. Like I was like, okay, here we go again. He's getting pulled into another one.
Yeah, just stay away from these people if you don't want to do it. You know who they are.
Tries.
And you know what they're going to do. Does he really though? Because what was he doing in France in the third arc? He went to a job that guy round up for him instead of going to get a job on his own in some way.
And how would he not? How did he not see that? Like he gave him that job for a reason.
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, that's why I felt a little.
Fool me twice. Fool me once. Fool me twice. Right.
I absolutely love Makoto, and mostly disagree with you guys' assessment of his arc. One thing I really liked about what they did with him is that he's a character who arcs every story arc, and they're following a bigger character arc trajectory, which I think is going to where Jeremy is talking about, where he has to fully embrace who he is, what he is. I think that's what Laurent is pushing him to. I think that is his destination, and I do think we're getting there, but every arc is a slow progression. But he loves these capsule toys that he buys in every arc, and every capsule toy he gets at the beginning of the arc represents it's symbolic for the arc he's about to go through. So in this first arc, he's super cocky and he thinks he's the greatest. And the second one, he's super humble and wants to just be normal. And in the third one, he's like, okay, I'm gonna do this on my own, my way. So it's not so much I'm not doing this anymore. He's like, I'm going to do it under my control, not by Laurent's rules. And I do think that is heading in a direction. So I really found that refreshing. Like I mentioned earlier, that this has time skips in between the story arcs. There's time skips, and that gives us time to kind of catch up with where he is next at the start of his next character arc, and then he starts going through with whatever the con, how it affects him. I found that really different than anything I've ever seen before, and I really enjoyed it. Even though I don't know like where it's going, if it'll pay off, but at least for these 3 story arcs, I liked what I saw. All right, so next, we're not there yet. So yeah, he meets a French tourist with part of a next scam. He pretends to return this French tourist wallet, but actually he's returning an identical wallet that's stuffed with newspapers. But the tourist gives him a big hug to thank him for it. This blonde, handsome French tourist, and him and his buddy, whose name is Kubo.
Yeah. I think it's
Kudo. Something like
Kudo.
Yeah.
This little short old man, and they open up the wallet to see how much they got, and it's full of newspaper. It's the original that they had faked. And then the cops show up outside, so they scatter, and he runs out the door, and he breaks through the alleys, and he ends up jumping into a taxi with the French tourist, and he's like, you're like me, you're a swindler, but I'm the greatest swindler in Japan, so I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to get my stuff back. And the guy's like, well, I'm heading to America, you're going to have to find a way to fly there. And so he swindles some people at the airport to steal their plane seat, and then flies to America. This French tourist is our other confidence man. His name is Laurent. And Jeremy, what do you think about Laurent?
I thought he was pretty entertaining. I did love that he introduced me to a new word I've never heard before, not because he himself says it, but because it's how he's described by somebody else. But he's a himbo, of course, referring to bimbo, but in the male vernacular. And I thought that was just hysterical. But he's basically overconfident. But is it really overconfident? Because he does seem to always succeed, as you would expect from a confidence man. He's very adaptable, comes up with interesting plans, always seems to have something up his sleeve, and has contacts whenever he needs contacts, which is exactly what you'd expect from a confidence man. In some ways, I really liked him, and in some ways, I absolutely hated him, especially in this first arc, because it seemed like whenever there was a problem, he was the Deus Ex Machina, or some plot that Laurent already had. He'd already solved this problem, and this was fixed, and that was fixed, and that was one of the things that was kind of making me frustrated with this first arc, was that Laurent was fixing whatever needed to be fixed, and yeah, I don't know. So I'm kind of irritated with him because of that. But he did grow on me a little bit as it went on, and he has like this desire to help his friends, which. Yeah, I'm not going to say everything about him, but yeah, he's interesting.
What do you think, Jason?
I thought he was actually one of the more entertaining characters. I didn't like his moral equivalency, though. The I only scam bad people kind of thing. Well, it's like, well,
Robin
you're
Hood.
also the scammer, so like,
Yeah.
Besides, I mean, you can't have a heist show without people willing to do heists. But I actually, it felt more believable when the story got pulled back and you got a bird's eye view of what was going on and just how many people he has involved in these scams. I think that made it much more palatable for me, instead of like this small team that, gets inside and pays off a couple people and then they get away with billions. It's like, no, they have an entire team posing as cops so that they can scam some people. Because I didn't see, like, I thought that it was going to go a more serious tone at the end of this first arc, because it's like, we've got this, highfalutin FBI agent being paid off, and I was like, oh, they're going to go way more serious with this than I thought. And then they do the twist, and I was like, okay, that makes this a lot more palatable as far as like why things go Laurent's way. But that was a long-winded way of saying I thought Laurent was all right. And I did love how he was a wannabe womanizer, but he was more of a sleazebag, so no one ever took him up on it, even though he's drawn very handsomely.
Mm-hmm.
He is a perfectly charming scumbag, and no one likes him, but I love him.
But he's my scumbag.
Yeah, I mean, he's a horrible person, but he's cool with it. He's accepted it.
He's a scoundrel.
His only way to help people is to push him to the edge of suicide sometimes or murder. But that's his way. Especially when I went back through my notes and stuff and going over the heist for a second time, knowing the ending. Laurent's the planner, right? He's the guy who comes up with the plans. And it's really easy to say at the end of a plan, like, wow, so many things had to go perfectly for that to happen. But they even point out Laurent's plans are actually really sloppy. He's not meticulous. He doesn't have every detail worked out, and things don't go perfectly to plan every time. This is, Jeremy, I know you don't like jazz, but jazz really is the perfect tie-in to this because of Laurent. Jazz is a very impromptu music compared to most music. It's very free-flowing, and while with that theme, Makoto is like a great musician, but Laurent is a great jazz player. He can anticipate the other musicians, he can anticipate where their music can go, and he can meet it accordingly. So when you get to the end, it's like, wow, that plan went perfectly. But then when you go back through and you think about the plan, you're like, oh no, it actually broke here. And then he called Cynthia, and he's like, "I need help. We have to adapt. Plus, I have to win this bet. Let's change this. Let's do it this way." And he does that really well. And he also has a really good read on people. So he knows Makoto is got a golden heart and is going to do the golden hearted thing. So he's like, "Well, I assume he's going to go muck up my plan. So I'm just going to have a plan to handle that." And it was really fun to watch, and because he's such a scumbag and everyone hates him, it's not like everyone's lavishing with the praise. He's not presented as like an OP character. He's just this creepy scumbag who's got like a bird's eye view into everyone's brain, and they all hate him for it. He even lets them get into trouble just so he can see how that plays out.
Right.
And I love that. And he's also, he's usually conning his own friends along with the targets just because he thinks that'll make the plan better. I really liked him. He brought a lot of fresh air to the regular, usually con movies and heist movies are like, here's the plan. And then it turns out we had another plan and that went perfectly. But this guy's like, none of my plans work out the first time. But don't worry, I have 5 more that are ready to go.
Well,
of course, we don't really get that until after the fact, though. Usually,
right? Yeah. Which is the formula for heist and con movies.
Yeah. Perfect moment was at the end of the second arc when the 2 of the characters are in pretty good danger, and he's like, they'll be fine. They know how to get out.
They know how to take care of themselves. All right, so they get to Japan and they make a bet. He's like, I'm here to sell someone something.
America. They get to Los Angeles.
Yeah, they get to LA. And he's like, I'm here to sell someone something. And Makoto's like, I'll make you a bet. Whatever you're going to sell, I will sell it for double. And if I win, you have to become my apprentice. And if you win, I'll work for you. So they go to this movie director's house, but he's actually a mafia drug bad guy. And they get there, and he's got all these beautiful women in the pool. And Laurent goes, hey, I brought that drug and the doctor who makes the drug. And he points at Makoto, and he pulls out some Japanese candy, which he had already offered. He's like, yeah, this is what I'm going to sell. And he pretends it's a drug. He hands it to one of the beautiful women in the pool. She takes it and she goes berserk. She's flipping all over the place. She's having this huge high, and then she like crashes into the pool and she's chilled. Well, it turns out.
Did you guys automatically recognize that she was a con character?
Yeah, but she's also been in the. I've seen the trailer for this too, so I knew she was part of the crew.
I didn't.
Okay. I was watching this. I was like, she's faking. She's faking. I know she's faking. That's just regular candy.
Yep. Which is true. This is Abby. She's part of Laurent's crew. and she was planted early on to help sell this whole thing. She speaks like in an accent while she's there, and he's like, she's a dumb bimbo, doesn't know anything, and we find out she's like this tough as nails, really hardcore woman. What did you guys think of her?
I really liked Abby. Her backstory kind of cements her, take care of yourself because I'm not going to do it for you kind of attitude. She's got this stone wall that she puts up around herself, and she's always willing to help in these jobs, but like once the job's done, she's just like, leave me alone. And as she develops as a character, she's probably the most interesting as far as these characters, being that we find out with her backstory, she's from a war-torn country, and like PTSD is real with this girl, and they do a really good job of presenting that in this fairly light storied anime. So I found her really interesting.
Yeah, especially in the second arc, she really gets that opportunity to express her PTSD. I loved the fact that at a certain point she actually changed her hairstyle because, that's always associated with change of view and perspective, personality. But also there's a moment where after having this wall that Edamame has to constantly try to beat through in order to, get to her and forge a relationship, even just as friends or compatriots. She finally breaks and gives him a smile. And I think that they did such a good job of getting to that point. It was a really good payoff. It actually meant more than I've seen in a lot of animes where they'll build up to some kind of relationship moment with characters, and it doesn't feel satisfying. For this, it was just a simple, subtle smile, and yet it was extremely satisfying because of how they developed her character and how they built her. I was a little bit intrigued, but also bored at the same time, which is kind of weird with her backstory. But it was good enough. The second arc I actually really liked until I saw the third arc, and then the third arc just blew it away. Which second arc is about her, is why I bring it up.
I really love Abby, like I do with all the characters here. I said I was biased, right? I did point that out. What I like about Abby is that she is not your normal female lead in an anime, especially in the fact that she's really mean to Makoto when she meets him. She's like, this jerk off, this virgin. She's constantly harassing him. And it's like, oh, okay, so we have the tsundere of the group. I don't actually like you. No, she's not a tsundere. She's a hard woman, and she will break your arm if you get in her way.
and stab you.
And stab you.
Yep.
And like you guys have pointed out, the relationship between her and Makoto that develops, it feels really natural, especially once we get to the third arc. That time they spend together was really refreshing. It just felt like so different than the typical stereotypical anime girl that usually is presented in a story like this. So yeah, I really liked Abby. Mm-hmm. All right, so Mr. Makoto is now realizing, oh gosh, what have I gotten myself into? These people have guns, they're drug dealers, this is bigger than I thought it was. And he notices Laurent is wearing a fancy watch. And he's like, wait a second, I've seen that watch on two other people before. Both my partner back in Japan, who we ran from the cops, and the old lady I sold water filters to. And he realizes, and we realize, that everything we've seen for this character's introduction was actually part of a Laurent con job to get Makoto into this con job. This is the hook for me. This was like, okay, I knew twists were coming. I've been watching for them, but I had my guard down for character introductions. I thought we had to get into the story before we got to it. The fact that you instantly start the whole show with a con that I didn't see coming, I was super excited about.
I love that the owner comes into the apartment and sees the filter, like, wait, I never bought a filter. I was like, that wasn't that lady's house.
I also love that old lady that she was a former honeypot. One of their you used to use her feminine wiles to help con, but now she's gotten old. She still thinks she has it, but she doesn't, and so she just helps with the tea.
Yeah,
Yep.
even the cops that chased him out of the house were con men.
They were actually his old workmates that
Right.
we find see in a
Yeah.
flashback later that he knows them.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. Again, another example of Laurent able to adapt real quickly, whereas Makoto, like, he sees the cops and instead of like adapting and having a plan, he just panics and flees and then gets caught in a trap because he's a good musician. He's not good at being on the fly. So Makoto, who starts freaking out, and it also happens that Laurent threw a piece of candy in his mouth, so it looks like he's freaking out from the drug. He grabs a gun, he bolts out the gate, and he gets away. And the mafia guys, and so there's Eddie Casano and there's Salazar, who we'll talk about in a second. But they're like, what was that? And Laurent's like, I'll go get him. Do you mind if I take Abby along? She can help me maybe talk him down. And they go off and they find him in an alleyway, and Abby kicks the out of him.
Yep.
And then he wakes up hanging from the Hollywood sign where they're like, hey, you need to do this job with us and we'll let you down. And that's how we end our first episode.
I loved how this was all just to get someone that can impersonate a doctor.
Japanese doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
I do think there's more to it than that. I do think this is a personal project for Laurent.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think he is looking for an apprentice, and I do wonder if Makoto's past and Laurent are somehow connected in some way.
That's very possible.
I think that's the neat part about all three of these arcs is it's like, yeah, there's a con job going on, but he's also helped fixing his friends.
Yeah.
Deal with like past issues.
Makoto, he agrees to help. So they do cut him down from the sign, and we get a little bit of his flashback, which is basically he was a normal guy trying to make his way in the world. He had a sick mom, and his dad had been arrested for a horrible crime. We find out it's child trafficking. He was a lawyer that was helping with child trafficking. So whenever he's tried to get a job, that reputation has followed him. People automatically think he's going to be sleazy. And he ends up working for a tea company that's a little underhanded in the way it sells the tea. He ends up getting arrested because of them, even though he was just, he wasn't exactly being malicious, but he was involved in this and doing false advertising he wasn't aware of. And then now it's even harder to get a job because of him being arrested. His mother ends up dying. And he actually goes to the old boss from the tea place, who is Kudo, the little old man who has already sold him out once. And basically says, if everyone's going to think I'm a scam artist, let's be scam artist. And it's important that at that point, he's not referring to himself as a con man. He thinks of himself as a swindler. And Laurent's like, no, you can be a confidence man. like it's a higher elevation of what you're doing, a higher purpose.
I think in the sub he does refer to himself as Japan's greatest con man.
Oh, does he?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm. You guys probably never did watch that old show Leverage. That like used to be on TNT. Had Timothy Hutton. It was.
You would watch weird shows.
Yeah, it's not a weird show. It's a show about a group of thieves and con men that join together to take out bad guys and right wrongs. Like we foreclosed your house illegally, and then they rob that guy and give the house back to the people. And every episode was a new heist to right the wrong.
So it's this anime, but live action.
But that's why I kept watching this. Like, oh, this is Leverage in anime form. Cool, I'm down with that. So they go to dinner. The scene is kind of important because they go to dinner and they talk about how, I don't actually have a drug. This was just candy. We're going to sell him a drug. He runs this drug empire. He ropes in young girls with hopes of being movies and then drugs them. They become his puppets.
Sex slaves.
Yeah, he's a horrible bad man. We're taking him down. At this dinner, when Makoto goes to leave, he tricks a guy into paying their bill. They got like lobster meals. This is a fancy, expensive dinner. He tricks a guy into picking up the bill for him. And he tells LeRon, I don't want to owe you anything. And then later that night, they're talking about it and more about the plan. And LeRon points out, just so you know, I paid for the bill of dinner. We only do this to bad people. That's important because for this arc of Makoto's story, he's not doing this like there's no goodness in it. He literally is ripping off any person he can, little old ladies if he can. He's just lashing out at the world, and I think that really, because of where this arc lands and where the second arc picks up, I think that's important. That LeRon's trying to teach him like we can be heroes, and he's like, no, I'm in this for me. It's a very different
Survival.
mindset. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That night he tries to sneak away. Abby beats him up, but he ends up going anyway. And then the next day, Laurent's like, "Yeah, I'm sure he's coming back. He'll be here by noon," and he doesn't show up. So they go to the mafia guy's house to come up with some other plan, and they get there, and Makoto's already there, and he's like, "Hey, I've already sold the drug for $10 million, so I guess I'm winning the bet." So yeah, he sold the thing for double. We find out the way he did this is he went and he studied all night long watching this guy's movies, which are terrible, like horrible action movies, like Steven Seagal now movies.
It looked like the actor they had on the billboards was Steven Seagal. It was great.
Right.
And come to find out, he really did like those
He really
movies.
does like the movies.
Yes.
So when he goes back to then he goes to the mafia guy on his own. He's like, "I've never seen your movies," and then pretends like, "Oh, they had a different name in Japan. I didn't realize these were your movies. I love these movies." And they bond over like, well, the way you love your movies that you make, which is a front for a business, but this guy apparently does really love his movies. Yeah, he's like, I love my drug that I made this drug, but I will sell it to you. I don't want to sell it for just $5 million, but I will sell it to you for $10 million and give you the recipe so you can make it yourself.
I love that he gives the sob story of, I made this drug because I was trying to cure cancer. I love that he starts off at this place of like ambivalence, or not, and is like, I was trying to do something good. My colleagues, stole from me, and so I was like, I'm gonna make the best drugs in the world.
It's a natural step. I mean,
Right. It made it sound much
right
more
foot.
believable.
Yeah.
What did you guys think? I do want to talk about the villains of each arc. So there's kind of two here. There's a villain, and then kind of the moral. Do we help this guy or not? So Eddie Casano is the mafia guy, and then his bodyguard Salazar. Any thoughts on them?
I think one thing that's helping sell this anime a bit is that all of the targets of their cons are not mustache twirling at the top, in some secret room bad guy, right? Like, yeah, I'm the bad of the bad guy, right? These are just people that have taken advantage of the system and have hurt people to get where they are. Obviously, the mafia guy is probably the worst offender out of all of them. But they're not tremendously bad people. Well, actually, I think Casano is probably the baddest of the bad people, but Salazar is definitely not. Salazar is, I think, a victim of his where he grew up, is how he decided that he needed to make a living in this really rough part of town, and now he's got this kid that he wants to spend the time with, and he doesn't want him to know that he does really bad things for a living. And that was a pretty decent, endearing story. Whether he should be let off the hook, I mean, these guys aren't cops, they're con artists, so that's not up to them. But as far as like a moral equivalency, I thought that was neat that they basically gave him a helping hand.
Yeah. I definitely agree. The the evil characters of each arc are pretty bad, but they're not like Austin Powers bad guy bad.
Sharks with lasers.
Yes, exactly. But I don't know. I think that this guy was like what you'd exactly expect of a mob boss. Almost a caricature of a mob boss in some ways. His behavior, like he had to hit every beat down to the point of like having a big gathering of everybody to celebrate, and then pulling out a baseball bat and going and hitting somebody because they betrayed him. Like he just had to hit every single beat that you'd expect from a mob boss. And that was fine. It was fine. It was just a little bit cheesy to me. But Salazar was interesting. I think I come in on the side of, his complaint was, I don't have the brains to go to college or whatever. But there's other jobs. There's construction. There's oil rig drilling. There's so many different things you could do that don't require you to necessarily go and get a master's or a bachelor's or something. You can just go and start working and make a reasonable amount of money. So I don't know. I have very little pity for him based on his situation, because I know that some of that was choice, and enough of it was choice that he could have made other choices and gone a different direction. Would have been maybe harder, but he could have. And so I was a little bit frustrated with that to some degree, but I also understand that, like you were saying, Jason, this is sort of an opportunity for the viewer to think about their perspective on it. And that is cool. I'm glad they included it for that reason. So yeah, they were interesting characters.
I think I like Eddie here as the villain compared to the other villains. I do kind of like Sam and Clark too, but I love that they added he's passionate about his movies. I just love that quirk about it. Like, he's the worst, horrible human, almost a character villain, but he has this one thing. Like, I do wish my movies were good. I do wish people liked my movies, and that's such a weird thing. Like, you're running a drug empire, you're murdering people, but man, I wish people liked. I wish I didn't get Razzies for my movies.
He's got chopsticks.
I really found that interesting. Salazar, I just like I actually didn't see it coming that I thought he was going to be the threat, the danger of the mission, and then to find out he's, that they build it. The fact that he even got any character development at all, I thought I was caught off guard by, and so I do like that. I do think it's kind of stereotypical, like, oh, I'm a bad guy, but I have a kid, so I'm a sweetie pie. Well, you probably murdered people, but all right.
Yeah.
I do like that he regretted.
I think one scene that helped distance himself from Eddie was the where Edamame he confronts him with the
you're
bear
gonna
camera.
reveal it.
Fine,
Troy wants to unravel it slowly.
No, it's fine. Bear camera, go ahead. Tell everyone about what's going to happen 3 episodes from now.
I mean, it's a small twist in this whole thing.
It's fine. Yes.
I was just saying that, like, that helped distinguish him from Eddie, and the fact that, like, hey, this is just a job. He's just my boss. I'm not loyal to him. He just pays me money. And as long as you're not interfering with me, do your thing. It's not my job to prevent him from getting scammed.
And I actually loved the way he said it, because he's like, I'm his bodyguard. I protect him, not his money.
Yeah, and just kind of showed that, he didn't like what he was doing, but the pay was super good. So, and he felt that his only life skill was muscle. So
the only reason I didn't want you to actually reveal that is because I really liked that moment and just wanted to say this was a cool moment of, I protect his body, not his money. Scam away. What do I care?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Feel free to cut it if you don't want me to reveal it.
The accountant shows up but he doesn't bring the money, and they're like, there's some irregularities with the story, which, Jeremy, you had mentioned, I think, a pre-show, how a lot of the scams might fall apart in a Google-friendly world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or DuckDuckGo, if you prefer.
Yes.
But the one thing I liked is that in this episode, they did that. The bad guys are like, yeah, we Googled you. You're not
Yes.
there. That's
That was
weird.
good.
I like how they were like, yeah, Japanese people, they like their privacy, they're not on social media.
I don't even, I'm not on social media. I didn't make any accounts. I'm like, hey, that's me.
It's weird because in most con heist movies, you have a hacker doing that in the background for you, right? That's how they always get around that. Oh, I built a Wikipedia page, so when they Google us, we're ready to go. In this case, though, we find out Eddie has sent a team of lawyers to the company that Makoto is supposed to have been fired from. And stolen the drug from, and when they get there, it's Kudo and the old lady have stolen his office. And we're like, oh yeah, I remember him. He took the drug and left. So Eddie's super happy. He's like, all right, this is legit, but we're not going to pay you because there's cops across the street that are watching us, and we're under surveillance.
I love that they're like scrambling to get the pictures and like degrees off the walls. They're like, oh, we gotta go, because the real doctor was coming to the office.
Right. I absolutely love that the cops refer to double doubles because they, in and out being such a big deal in California. So I like those references. I said no pickles. So yeah, they celebrate with dinner and then they go to he wants to show him something, so they get in Eddie's car and Salazar drives and the cops start chasing them. They're like, we have to lose the cops. So they have this crazy car chase and the cops end up getting T-boned and wrecked. And then the mob guy calls the cop and is like, are you okay? And we find out the cop is on the payroll of Eddie. But they do get away and they go to this grungy old factory where the drugs have been made. And he's like, Eddie tells the story. There was a sushi restaurant I really liked, but when the chef switched, the sushi sucked. And so sometimes it's not about the recipe, it's about the guy who makes it. So I want you to make it for us right now. And so Makoto throws this fit. I can't work under these conditions. This place is filthy. And the Ron's trying to like, oh, he had very precise instruments and it was so clean. Like, these Japanese, they're so fickle. So Eddie's like, fine, we're going to renovate this entire place and turn it into exactly how you want it. The super pristine laboratory. I'm going all in on this. It'll be done in a few weeks, and you're going to stay as my guest in my house in Salazar's bedroom until this is done. Meanwhile, the cops get back from their car crash, and there's these people on their laptops, and they're like, who are you? And they're like, we're the FBI. And we meet Laura, her name is Dickens, and she's like, Detective Anderson, I know you're on his payroll.
Everyone recognizes the name Dickens, by the way. They're right. Like, oh yeah,
Dickens, big FBI agent. And she's like, Anderson, I know you're on the payroll, but she reveals Eddie is part of what we're going after, but we're here for Laurent. Laurent is a con man, and we're going to take down his whole team. And you're now part of. I'm bringing you in, and I understand you now work for me. You no longer are on his payroll. We're doing this.
I love when she turns around. They all flip her off, and then when she
there's a lot of middle fingers in this show. They love giving the middle finger. We're not going to talk about this character yet because it's not time.
Right.
All right. Yeah, so Edamura starts staying in Salazar's room.
Abby keeps coming over through the window.
Abby brings over an iPad so that he can watch. They get an actual drug maker to teach him how to make drugs. So he takes lessons every night over the iPad. He also notices that Salazar has toys in his room, so he realizes Salazar has a kid. And Dickens decides that she needs an inside man, and there's 1 week left. So Makoto and Salazar, they're out on the town just hanging out, and he mentions, hey, what about your family? And he's like, well, my wife died and my kid's in foster care, and I'm only allowed to visit them. And it's supposed to be my day to visit them, but I was ordered to take care of you. He's like, well, then let's go get him. So they pick up the kid, they go to the carnival, they have a good time. Capsule toys come into play again because the kid buys one, and he gets a gangster, and he's like, oh, I don't like gangsters. I like bodyguards like my dad is. And showing that Salazar is like, oh yeah, I'm a scumbag. Oops. And then Makoto goes to the bathroom. The cops and Dickens grab him, and they're like, we need an inside man, but we want you to make the drugs. We want the sale to go through so that we can catch both parties in the act. And then we will send you home to Japan. here's a pair of glasses with a radio inside them. You need to call us. You need to wear these when you make them, and then we'll be able to bust everybody. And then they go drop the kid back off. They talk about, hey, your son loves you. You probably shouldn't do this for him. And then when he wakes up, it's like the day before. Yeah, it's the day before he wakes up, and that's when he finds the teddy bear with the camera. And then they go downstairs, and Eddie is throwing a party tomorrow's the big day, and he's like, but I know there's a traitor in our midst, and he pulls a baseball bat. And it looks like he's going after Makoto, but he hits his accountant square in the nuts. His accountant was also skimming money from him. Mm-hmm. So he beats him, and he's like, all right, let's everyone have a sushi party, or else. Makoto confronts Salazar. We already mentioned. He asked him, like, hey, what about this? Hey, well, I was just his bodyguard. Makoto puts on the glasses and asks the FBI, all right, if I do this, save Salazar. And they tell him no. They're like, you think you can bargain? You're a criminal. No. He's like one of the worst ones. We're going after all of them. Mm-hmm. That was mean, by the way. This turns out to be very mean. All right, so they go to the renovated factory. And he's going to it's called Sakura Magic, right? So he's got to make these drugs. It's got to look like the candy. He starts going through the process. Dickens is in his ear, trying to like pump him up. Like, you could do this. Didn't you just study how to make drugs? You can do it. He makes it. If we find out, she's not going to help Salazar. And then he talks with the con artist, and during a break, they're mean to him, kind of. And he again asks the FBI, like, what's going to happen to them? Well, they'll get prison. That's what happens. And then when he finishes the drugs, the sale goes through. The FBI burst in. They reveal that Makoto worked for us the whole time. And Abby gets all upset. She grabs a gun, and the FBI open fire, and they kill her and Laurent, obviously, knowing that this is only episode 5 we're on. Not that big of a mystery, but yeah.
Okay, so hold on. Just at this point, so I didn't see any of the trailers. I didn't see what was going on. I honestly thought Abby and Laurent were dead.
I'm in your boat. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I was like, wow, this show took a serious turn.
Yeah. I liked it too. I thought this is
too.
Interesting. Now we're going to see what's going to happen with this kid and how he's going to react to this and how is that going to affect him. I thought there was a lot of potential there.
You do have a theme of liking when people die. And I know we all do. Like, hey, when the stakes are real, that makes the drama more enticing. I know that's what you mean. But it does sound like I love it when just people die.
They get shot,
especially if I get to know them a bit first.
I'm a serial killer doing a podcast.
That's right.
All right. Makoto gets really upset. He takes Dickens hostage. During this time, Eddie turns up one of the furnaces. There's an explosion. Salazar protects Makoto from the blast, and Makoto chases after Eddie. They get kind of in a fight where Eddie just beats him with a cone. Like, just two not physical people beating on each other.
And we're talking about like one of those rubbery cones. I'm like, you're not doing a lot of damage here, Eddie.
Yeah.
Just bringing it like, it was kind of silly. But it's just like, two guys who are desperate. Salazar comes up and ends it, and then they all get arrested by the FBI. The end of this arc is the FBI talks to Eddie, and they're like, we know everything that happened. And he's like, well, you have the only video evidence. What if I paid you $20 million and this went away? And she's like, you can't buy me for $20 million. You can buy me for $100 million. And he's like, all right, that's a lot of money, but I can make money back. And so he empties his Swiss bank accounts, gives her $100 million. She hands him the video chip. As he's walking out, Salazar's being walked in. And they're like, yeah, we'll just blame it on Salazar. It'll be perfect. And he walks out the door. And Makoto starts freaking out like, you scumbags, how can you do this? And they knock him out. And he wakes up on a beach. in a hammock. And Laurent's there, and Abby's there, and the FBI agent is there, except for her name is Cynthia. She's actually the boss of the con team the whole time. She's their financer. Laurent's just the planner. He's not actually the boss. So this is a good time to talk about Cynthia, the actual head of the group. Jeremy, what do you think of her?
I actually really liked Cynthia. Up until we got to the third arc, I liked Abby more. Her story was more interesting, but you really get a sense of Cynthia's tragic past and who she really is or was before she decided to become a confidence man, whatever. Yeah, I thought she played the part really well. There were moments of sincere humanity that came through, and I say that because when you're a confidence man, I'm assuming that you are looking at people as experiments, as objects, as things that you can manipulate. So you kind of lose a bit of humanity from your perspective, because you are separating yourself from them. You have to not care about their feelings and what's going to happen to them. But there's these moments where you actually do see her sincerely express emotions in response to the things people do. She's not completely composed, and this happens more than once. On one occasion, she literally has to leave the area because she looks like she's about to burst in frustration. And it's really entertaining to see that there's a person like that that's actually taking part in these cons. Like sometimes it almost seems like she's straddling the line of nope, I'm done with this. I'm so pissed. I have to leave right now. And that to me makes it a really entertaining con. It would have been more boring if everybody was as competent and calm and had hooded eyes, lids constantly like Laurent does. But yeah, I really like Cynthia.
I liked her at the end, during the third arc. I thought she was okay, a little boring for the first two, probably because that there wasn't much screen time for her, except for like her involvement in the cons. But besides that, yeah, she was a pretty good character.
I like her much more as the lead of the group than I do Laurent. I think that really makes the dynamic better for the whole team. I'm really interested in her backstory. We do get some of her backstory, but then how did she go from where that leaves her off to this insanely rich woman who
owns an island?
Yeah, owns an island and uses her wealth to fund con man operations just to help people.
Right.
And then put together a team that we're about to find out is not a small team. They have a network here, which does make things easier, doesn't it? But yeah, I think she's great. And I also love that she drinks a little too much. And then she runs hot and she gets emotional really fast. If she's insulted, she gets pissed. There's a scene where she plays the role of the honeypot, and then the next scene she's in the shower gargling, and I'm like, yeah, okay. There's an innocent soul inside her that she has put a warrior con woman on top of to do this mission, and I'm really interested how that all developed.
Yeah.
So we learned here's the big reveal of the thing. The FBI were never the FBI; they were all con men the whole time. Now I assumed Cynthia was in on it. My actual assumption was that the FBI was using Laurent as a way to capture bad guys, that they had teamed together and supported each other.
So I had a suspicion of that, yeah.
But then to find out that, nope, every single FBI agent was a con man. I
love that they hold up the prop guns. They start firing them. They're like, these are even prop guns.
Kudos there. He's like, I was here too. And yeah, so the whole thing was just to get this money. And then they gave the real video footage to Salazar, who turned it over to the cops. Eddie has been arrested. Salazar gets to be with his son now. And they made $110 million off this one heist alone, which they break off for everyone to have a share. But Laurent does point out, I win the bet.
Yeah.
Went to 5-10. And again, when I look back at this, I was like, the plan was never to get $100 million. The plan was to get $5 million. When Makoto changed things, Laurent saw an opportunity to push this to the next level. It's like, hey, Cynthia, can you create a fake FBI? Because I have a plan. And I love that. That is so cool to me. So yeah, and they're like, hey, Makoto, you have a lot of potential. We want you on the team as part of the con man network. And he's like, please give me a few years to think about it. He goes back to Japan. He gives the money to the cops and he turns himself in. My daughter hated this story beat. She's like, what? You can't turn yourself in. I think it's great.
I liked it.
I kind of liked it, but like the whole like giving the money to the cops, I was like, how does that solve anything? The cops aren't going to go divvying that out to the people that you've conned.
They don't even know.
Yeah,
who you've conned.
Yeah, like do you even know the people you've conned? Like,
yeah. But I thought it showed his naivety, though. That was what intrigued me about it. Like he thinks that this is the way to balance the scales and make things right. But the only thing that really did was his time, the money, like you say. Who knows where that went?
Honestly, it's one of those things that works for me so well thematically. I don't really care about like real world application. This is because of the whole thing is by spending time with Salazar and Eddie and realizing how a villain he's been in his way, and wanting not to go down that path, especially after telling Salazar, very kind of like what Jeremy was talking about. You had choices. He accepts the responsibility for his actions and turns himself in. I feel like that was a really cool arc, and we're only 5 episodes in, and he's not done growing. I think that's cool.
I think it's cool, but I think that the continuing growth that he does is not. I don't like the direction that it went. I mean, if this is going to be your resolve now, is that you realize, oh man, swindling is bad. Being a con man and tricking people is bad. And then now you're going to be like, okay, well, I feel this way, but I'm still going to go back to the people that I know are doing this, and I'm going to hang out around them. I mean, I know he doesn't do that immediately in the second arc, but he starts getting more and more comfortable with that.
I think it's swindling for yourself that's bad. And right now he is very much in a swindling is bad. Whereas then he does have to arc that swindling can have a greater good purpose. Yeah. I guess, and I can see how that would clash with some people morally, but I watched Leverage, so I'm cool with it. It was every episode.
I think it makes sense. I just think that there's like a really fine line. You have to be careful, not tripping over, because you eventually get to the point where you start making those choices as to who deserves to be swindled and who doesn't. And maybe you're not always right. So that I think could pose a moral question, even then, for Robin Hoods.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts on the first arc? Go to the second arc.
Let's move on.
Okay, second arc. 2 years have passed, and again, I absolutely love that. I just love that it's like not afraid to say 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone went their separate ways.
Or was I thought 2? It was longer.
I thought it was like 2 to 3, something like that.
Because he told him 3 to 4 years, but I don't remember how long. I
would have written it down.
I thought it was longer.
I don't think it matters.
It's very important.
It's so important. Nope, I just wrote he's in prison. Yeah, okay.
This podcast strives for accuracy.
A few years have passed.
Fair enough.
Again, our intro scene is him in an airplane that is crashing. It's blowing up.
With Abby in the piloting.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see a dirt bike race, and it's a hectic dirt bike race, and Abby ends up crashing, and Laurent comes and he's like, Abby, you need to be careful, but I have a job. It's been a while, and I think we can get the boy back in. I
love that during this race, Abby's continually kicking other racers.
Mm-hmm. Still as vicious as ever.
And that's really because this is Abby's arc, right?
Yep.
But yeah, he knows that Makoto's getting out of prison. He even sends Kudo to Makoto's prison who tells him, "Hey, just so you know, Laurent wants you for a job if you're ready to go." And Makoto has made the decision. I'm done with the con man lifestyle. I'm going to go and become a real good worker. I've learned how to be a mechanic while in prison. And he goes back to his home. He pays his back rent. He buys a capsule toy, and this time it's of a little farmer. So in the first one, it was like a guy who ruled all of Japan, the king of Japan. And this time it is a farmer, little peasant guy. Again, showing very much that his mindset has altered. I love that. I know it's dumb that he gets exactly the capsule toy he needs for his arc, but I enjoy symbolism.
I kind of wonder if he gets several of them and throws away the ones that aren't going to work for the arc. We just see the one he kept.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so he gets a job with an old mechanic and starts working with him, and eventually the guy's like, "Man, you're doing such a good job. I want you to start helping me work on the airplanes. Like, we make our money from the cars, but the airplanes is where my passion is." So he starts becoming a mechanic for airplanes, and they talk about airplanes a lot. And then we jump back over to, we see this boss man. He fires this lady, and clearly is a scumbag and cans her. And then he's out drinking and he's partying with Cynthia. And she's like, "Man, do you like gambling? Here, I know a secret gambling spot. Take this money, go there, place a bet on Abby in the fight, and then bring me back my money." And he does, and he wins a ton of money. And he asks Cynthia, like, "Well, what was that?" Abby wins this fight against this, and she's a little tiny girl, and there's this huge woman, right? And Abby beats her, and the fights are rigged. All the gambling in there that's predetermined. And he's like, "Oh my gosh!" So he gets all his money, and he goes there the next night. And he bets it all on Abby, and she loses, even though she bites the girl's ear.
Yeah,
and I wonder if Abby was
not to lose.
Yeah, I feel like Abby was like, "Beat me."
Yes.
Yeah, she goes a little off script.
Yeah. But he loses all his money. Laurent, who's running the casino, is like, "Sorry, sir, that's what gambling is. What do you mean we rigged our fights? That would be crazy." And then you see Cynthia take all this money and give it to the woman that got fired. But what's that?
I thought this was really cheesy and weird because I was like, there was never any connection established between Cynthia and this woman, or any of the con artists and this woman. It was just like this situation that happened out in the middle of a void, like just off in left field somewhere, that this woman is having this interaction with the guy.
This was all to set up the next big con they were doing,
sure,
relay the idea of what they were attempting to do.
Yeah, I saw the general foreshadowing in okay, we're going to do the same thing on a bigger scale now, but this specifically, this woman bringing the money to her and leaving it for her as a present, since she had been mistreated by this boss so terribly, sexually harassed. That was the part where I was like, okay, if they took the money for themselves, I could totally get it. They just picked this guy as a mark, but how did they know that he sexually harassed this woman and got her fired? Are they watching all of the sexual harassment suits? How did they find this one?
No, but it's also not impossible that Cynthia did know. This really gave me the impression that for the past couple of years, they've been doing jobs. Whatever. I mean, we don't really know how Cynthia's system works either.
Yeah, it really is like the little weird Robin Hood thing, and part of me hates it because it's just not enough data, And it's like, oh, this thing we needed done. There it is. It's done. It's over here. There, we've moved the story along. Like, screw you.
Yeah, storytelling.
Stinking story
Crazy.
along.
All right.
How dare you tell me a story?
Yeah, give me all the details. I want to see the script now.
Yeah, and then Laurent tells Abby, like, this was just a warm-up. We're actually going after a much, much bigger fish. And then, so Makoto, he gets, like, this pep talk from this old guy about a job. He's like, hey, I want you to go do this job. So he goes, and he's doing the job, and Cynthia and Laurent and Abby show up, and he's like, what are you doing here? They're like, this is my island. You didn't realize you came back to my island? He's like, I thought it was deja vu. And yeah, the old guy, the old mechanic, in on it. Laurent had paid him to.
They ask him, like, you really think you're going to be a master mechanic in 2 months? Really?
God, I love that. I love when the engine's breaking. He's like, "You've been training on planes for like 2 months. I really thought you could fix stuff. It's insane."
Again, his naivety.
There's a couple times where they influence people with like their ego and like that they believe something just through ego. And actually, Makoto pulls it off on someone else later. I wonder if that's kind of how he figured that out. Like, if I tell this guy the plane will be better, he'll believe the plane would be better.
Clark. Yeah.
So yeah, they're like, we want you to work with us. He's like, I'm not doing con jobs, but I am a mechanic now, so I'll be your mechanic. Abby's gonna be the pilot. They're entering in plane races for the next job. Abby refuses to fly a plane that he worked on by herself, so she makes him fly with it. The plane blows up, and they have to parachute out. It actually wasn't because of Makoto. Laurent had snuck a pill in the plane that to test the formula. It was a little too strong. It wasn't supposed to blow up the plane. It was supposed to.
It's just supposed to stop the engine.
Yeah. And then we're shown plane races. I really like the plane races. Most of the art style of the anime I really like. It's kind of an abstract, squarish, watercolor look to it. But the plane races are CGI, and I really like them.
So I'll say everything that was based in reality, I thought was fine. Like everything looked good, and even the characters. But man, the backgrounds were just so jarring.
Yes, I agree.
The abstractness of the sunsets and the mountains and the background grass, it was just like, this is, it's not working for me.
Yeah, it was a little bit oversaturated for me too. Like the colors were so vivid and contrasting with each other, and just swirled around.
Let me guess, Troy loved it.
Oh, Troy loved it.
I just said I loved it. I said I loved it before you guys even talked about it.
Sorry, we weren't sure if it was this or something else. You know, everything.
So we learned that they're marks, right? There's two brothers. There's Sam and Clark. Sam owns the air races. Clark is a pilot in the air races, and he always wins because the races are rigged. There are two Iranian princes.
Iraqi, I thought, but I could be wrong. No, they're
Middle Eastern princes. Yeah, maybe Saudi.
Yeah.
Anyway, Saudi princes.
That's right. They were Saudi.
Saudi princes, who have been kicked out of their family, so they use this air race now to make money. And by controlling the outcomes, they always get money. Sam is more of a scumbag, and Clark is the nicer one. There was one race that ended up being real. There was a guy named Lewis, and he had been paid off to lose, but he rebelled. He went for an actual race, and his plane blew up. He crashed. And now he's stuck in a wheelchair by Sam's doing. So Laurent and the group are targeting these guys as their next marks. So thoughts on Sam and Clark?
I actually liked their duo because Clark was the plane driver, right? Or pilot?
Yeah. Clark flew.
So Clark was a decent guy that wanted to believe that things were fine, even though on the inside he knew his brother was corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wanted it to be fair, but at the same time he really liked the girls and the money. But he also had he was dumb. He had no idea of or wisdom to look at like the future, and his brother did. Sam knew that the popularity of the racing was going down. There wasn't a lot of people wanting to even watch, and that they needed to mix things up, but he also didn't want his brother to lose. So, it was, I thought they're, as bad guys, if you will, I thought it was a good pairing because obviously Sam was the corrupt one, more so than Clark. But that I'm glad that they focused on getting Sam instead of Clark.
Yeah, there's something really interesting that I guess it was kind of fuzzy. I was starting to get it, but it just clicked as you were describing them. In each of these arcs, there's a villain, and then there's somebody that's benefiting from that villain being a villain. And usually that person isn't a bad person, but when the villain gets their comeuppance, they're going to lose that thing that they benefited from. And so they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do to survive and deal with that. And in this situation, that's Clark. In the last one, it was Salazar. And then there's another person in the third arc that happens with. And I think that's actually really cool. That's a really cool pattern. I really liked Clark. I really liked Clark a lot. I thought his womanizing behavior and everything was pretty silly, but totally believable in his situation. I mean, I've seen it in countless shows where you have a character like that. That's the way they behave. And I think that was one of the things that was like his only scummy attribute. Otherwise, he was a pretty good guy. And Sam, I actually liked Sam as well because he knew exactly what he was. He didn't want to hide it. I mean, he did obviously for the cons, but like between him and his brothers, like he wasn't ashamed of it. If there was an opportunity where he could tell somebody or speak honestly with somebody, he would prefer to do that. He would rather not hide who he is, and that was admirable. If you're gonna have a villain, at least have that villain be like, I'm not ashamed of who I am. I am this person, and I cultivate it, and I'm gonna take advantage of everybody that I can. That was an interesting villain to me. Because of the way he's doing it. His entire villainy is about secrecy, which is different than, the first arc's villain. Right. So I liked both of them. I thought they were very entertaining, and I loved the conversations between Sam and Cynthia. those were my favorite parts of the entire season. So good.
I mean, obviously, I like them. I really like Clark and his love for the flying. I love how even when it's a competitor or not him that does really well, he gets excited about it. You can see that he loves what he's doing, and that's what he cares about, and I do like that. Sam, my only really issue with Sam is they present him as like he's going to be a tough nut to crack. How do we hook him? How do we hook him? Once they do hook him, like he falls for everything, hook, line, and sinker, really fast and really easy at the end. He felt a little bit less of a challenge than where we just came from.
The only thing that made it feel a bit believable is that, he was in a position where he was failing as far as generating money, and it felt like desperation.
Yes, that's true. And that is a good caveat. It's just he was so guarded at the beginning, which they're at the time trials. Abby does hers. She barely qualifies because she has turns out PTSD. We didn't know that. And when she flies, it gets triggered, but she does manage to qualify. I love the Boba tea joke where Laurent keeps flashing his tea at Makoto. Makoto's like, no, I don't want anything from you. I don't want anything from you. At the end, just grabs it, drinks the whole thing. That made me laugh. So Cynthia makes a big show, when they finish the time trial, because they're the first woman owner and woman pilot in the race. So this is new and exciting, and the crowd's eating it up. And then they go to the same pool that Sam and Clark are at. They're out there with a bunch of, naked women. Sam, though, is just reading tweets. And the crowd
this part.
This part's so good. And this part, honestly, this kind of comes back also to the Google thing. This is really smart. Sam's reading how the crowd's not really in love with Clark anymore, but it's just Makoto on 5 different phones and a laptop doing all these tweets and replying and liking and. But yeah, the two girls.
And here's Laurent on the couch just lounging around. He's going, aren't you going to help me?
Nope. Especially after. It's also, Makoto loves the con. He loves the act of it. He said, I'm just in it for mechanic, but here he's already on the phones. It's been like one day and he's in. He's hooked.
Even though he keeps denying it, he's like, I'm just here to be a mechanic. I'm not helping you guys.
Yep. The two girls go, and Clark's like, come swim with me, Abby. He thinks she's so cute. And she's like, I don't have a bathing suit. No problem. And so he talks her into skinny dipping. Except for she's such a good swimmer, he can't find her in the pool ever. But then Cynthia hits on Sam, and she's like, hey, I know the races are rigged. Wouldn't it be cool if my girl did well? And Sam's like, I don't do old.
Yeah.
He doesn't really say that yet. She gives him his number. They go to the apartment. He calls her and is like, let's set up a thing. At the next race, he's like, I picked Abby to lose. And she's like, what? I thought we had an agreement. He's like, no, I don't do old. You're not working with whatever you think charms you have going on.
Saggy
you old saggy cow.
You hag.
Insults her terribly. Abby ends up winning anyway. Again, exciting the crowd. And he realizes, okay, maybe we can make this work. So he makes a call and he decides Cynthia and Clark will be, or Abby and Clark will be in the finals. So
I think one thing that's a bit understated but is shown really well is just how much stress this is putting on Abby, because she's not a seasoned pilot and she is throwing up. She's sweating like bullets. She's passing out. This is putting a huge amount of strain on her to do this job. And here she is just continually pushing herself because as we'll find out later.
Right now,
yeah.
actually.
Oh, okay. So go ahead.
Makoto had asked Laurent, why does Abby do this? And Laurent says, you want to know why Abby does this? Because she wants to die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then, so Makoto tries to talk to Abby on a Ferris wheel. It doesn't go well. It's his first attempt at reaching out. She kind of
so high.
Yeah, and then he's afraid of heights. So the Laurent reveals the plan is they're going to create an underground casino inside their hotel room, and that they're going to get him to bet all his money on Abby, and then he'll lose, and then have Abby dive the race and take all his money. But he rejects Cynthia again at her next time she tries again. So they're like, okay, we need a plan B.
She gets so upset.
Oh my God.
God, I love the way she gets furious.
Yep.
Hold this pillow like this, and then she walks off screen.
And comes back, boom.
So the guy who crashed, they bring him and his wife in, and they have the wife introduce Makoto as their mechanic, especially when their mechanic just had a pet emergency and quits immediately, and so they desperately need a mechanic. And she's like, "Oh, well, I have this mechanic who used to work for my husband, but I promised him to Cynthia." And Clark's like, no, interview with us. And so Makoto agrees. Oh, I guess I'll interview with you guys too. So that's their new way in. The next or that night, Makoto's checking things out, and he gets grabbed by masked men, who then leave him after saying that it was too soon. He tells the others, and they're like, "Oh, that's weird. Don't worry about it." He goes to his interview. He messes with the plane, and they're like, "If you can make the plane faster, we'll let you win." He messes with the plane. Clark only gets a mediocre time, but all these fans run up and they're like, "Oh my God, the plane was doing so much better. You were obviously so cool." And he's like, "Yeah, you'll have to get used to it. Then it'll be faster. But only a true artist would recognize the difference of what I've done." And Clark's like, "I did recognize the difference of what you've done." But Sam's like,
obviously, you got less time. The wind was all high, and he did an amazing job.
Yep.
Exactly.
Sam's like, "Nope, this is scummy. I don't like this." And then the masked men come back and they grab Makoto and they're like, "No, he was using an underground casino to bet against Lewis, and he sabotaged him. And this guy is a scumbag." And Sam's like, "Oh, really? I'll buy him from you because I like scumbags. I'm a scumbag." And really, the only
reason. Did you say underground casino?
Yeah, underground casino.
Wait, what?
And so the masked men work for Laurent. They had grabbed him a night early when they were out doing practicing it and weren't supposed to. And they forgot to tell Makoto.
Yeah, whenever Laurent believes he needs a more convincing act from Makoto, he never tells him what's going on.
Yep.
So Sam has him take him to the casino. He goes in disguise so that they won't recognize him, but obviously they do. So Laurent again is the head of the casino. He comes in and he bets $300,000 on Abby, and they're a little surprised because Makoto they don't have a ton of cash on hand for this, and they can't give away too much money, but they need him to think he can win, and he wasn't supposed to bring this much money. They also didn't realize how poor he was. This was actually supposed to be a much bigger job than it ends up being, but he has much more in debt, which is why he's going to an underground casino. So he bets $300,000. He wins. We see more about Abby's PTSD and how she was a ballerina. Her home city was bombed by an American pilot. Sam comes in the next day, bets $1 million, wins again. And now Laurent knowing they have to do something, reveals, I know you're the prince who owns the races. You're not allowed to bet here anymore. You can keep your money, but get out. So then Makoto goes to him and is like, well, you could always have me place the bet, but to make it not suspicious, let's not bet on Abby. Let's bet on someone else. So Makoto goes and he places the bet for him. And then they go and they sabotage this poor guy's plane with Cynthia giving some great fan service. I don't care what Sam says about her. She's fabulous.
Yeah. She's drawn very well.
Yeah, she distracts the other team so Abby can put the same pill that blew up the plane in the beginning in his thing. He crashes. They get all their money back now, and now Sam is very desperate, right? I loved how that, again, just adapting the plan. The plan was breaking. It was going wrong. Let's change it up. That's great. I
love his insurance later.
Yep. Sam pulls a gun on him. They calm him down, and then they start talking. Later, Lewis and Abby takes Lewis out for a walk, and she's like, hey, were you the pilot that dropped the bomb? And
the way they draw her face when she asks this, it's this close-up of her eyes, and it's just like, she's gonna...
And she pulls out a knife. He stands up out of the wheelchair and says, yeah. Well, he's like, I dropped a lot of bombs, but basically, yes. And before she can kill him, Makoto gets there, tackles her. The wife shows up, Isabel, and Lewis reveals that, yeah, I kind of figured out what was going on. I want to die.
Yeah, like, why didn't you kill me? Finish the job.
So, do you guys think he really was the pilot? Or is he lying to commit suicide?
Well, he said he was sorry later.
He does say sorry.
Yeah, I do think that maybe he wasn't the one that dropped the bomb that she was affected by, but maybe he's dropped other bombs there.
Right.
They didn't confirm it. They just said that they were,
It just feels like it'd be contrived if he was that exact pilot.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But she's obviously blaming him for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Makoto helps Sam come again. This is all part of a plan. But Makoto's like, "Hey, Sam, if you tell them you're sorry and show them that you're not betting, on a fixed race by having another team owner come and place a bet, what about Cynthia? She could come, make a smaller bet, and then you could go make a huge bet and win and split it with her." So that's what he does. He goes there and says, I apologize. I brought Cynthia. We're both going to bet, but not on the same thing. So, everything's on the up and up. And he bets all the money he has, $25 million, on his brother to win. Again, that was not the plan. It was supposed to be betting on Abby, but that didn't work out. So they decide, we need to sabotage Clark's plane so that he loses. When Makoto talks to Clark, he's like, Clark, I've been doing some thinking. It was your idea to have a fair race with Lewis. And Clark's like, yeah, it was. It was my fault. I feel guilty about what happened to him. I just hate always having to be the winner. I wanted a good race for once. And then Makoto goes and talks with Lewis, and Lewis really yearns to fly again. And he's like, guys, I got a plan. And he doesn't put the pellet into things plane. They put Lewis in Abby's plane and have Lewis and Clark. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just hit. All right, that's a little silly. Anyway, is. Lewis and Clark have a great race to classical music. I don't know the song. I know it was in Fantasia, the one with the flamingos and the yo-yos. But yeah, they have this awesome race. Sam is watching from the casino, which I forgot to mention had a little bit of a revamp. But yeah, and then they come in and it's a photo finish and Clark wins. And it's like, oh no, the heist went, the con's gone wrong.
Yeah.
But on the TV in front of Sam, it says that Abby won. It was because it was such a photo finish, and the fireworks outside are purple, showing that.
So to be earlier in the episodes, she did have a narrow win against another pilot, and they just re-showed that footage.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's going to come to the reveal later, but yes.
What? I thought this is the reveal, isn't it?
No, this is.
It's only the first reveal. There's another reveal after the reveal.
It's always a double twist with a double cross. Jason's right. So what they did is they took the footage from the old race to show her winning, and they put a tint over the window so that if red fireworks went off, purple fireworks would be seen. But if purple fireworks went off, purple fireworks would be seen. No matter who won the race, it was going to look like Abby won in the casino. That means all they had to do was have a photo finish. This is such a cool con. But so Sam, freaking out, runs outside, but then realizes, oh no, I won the bet, and he runs back but when he goes back, everyone's gone except for Makoto and Abby, who had returned to come back to everyone, but they already ran away, and so Sam starts having them shot at. They jump out Makoto grabs her and they jump out the window. They pull the parachute on her flight suit and sail into the water while Laurent and the rest are on a yacht. Like, I'm sure they're fine.
Yeah.
We should have told them, but all right.
We'll go pick them up now.
This is classic Laurent, right? Like, I think Makoto's going to screw with this. So let's do a con that no matter what the ending is, I win no matter what.
Yep.
Yeah. Very much like this one.
That's right, because Makoto was supposed to put the pill in Clark's plane, but because he wanted Lewis and Clark to have a fair.
My only issue with this con, in the first one, the bad guy willingly handed over his money. In this one, they do technically rob him because he did win the bet.
Right.
This is literally just stealing from a guy, not so much as him voluntarily giving you the money.
Well, I don't know though. Is it really that different? Because if you're giving them something that is not what they think that they're supposed to get, and they're giving you money for that thing, you're actually not making a transaction. You're selling them a lie.
Right, but it's just not as technically satisfying to me.
Okay.
And even though as much as I love the twist and how they pulled off the gun and how they adjusted it to work, like I said, it's just not as satisfying. Lewis makes up with his wife. Abby and Makoto, have a better relationship now. They get picked up in the water. That's the end.
Oh yeah, that's right. And Lewis grabbed Abby and apologized to her.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty sweet.
Flying. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and this was the moment I was referring to earlier when basically because Edamame pushed her out and then went down to the water with her in the parachute and everything. He's how was that? Did you enjoy that? Was that a thrill worth living? Basically. She says, "Yeah, that was great." And he's bawling. We finally see his face, and he's like, "Oh,
I'm glad someone had fun."
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. That's all that mattered. And that's where we get a smile from Abby for the first time, really a sincere smile when she's looking at Edamame, and that's really satisfying. That was cool.
Okay, last case. We're in France now. Laurent and Cynthia are on a cold beach in France. He's drawing her. She thinks he's a scumbag. But they're
he's
there.
Like, no, I'm hitting on you. And she's like, ew.
Yeah, I'm flirting with you. Love it.
Yep.
Don't.
They're there because Makoto has recently become a sushi chef in France. And they go to visit.
Leave him alone.
They go to visit him and they ask him to join. And he's like, no.
Well, what I find really hilarious about the scene is he's making it how he probably thinks it should be made as a Japanese person from somewhere from Japan where this is a very common food. And then he's got they're Chinese, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so they're like, no, you've got to do it this way. And then the food critic comes and just destroys.
Well, it turns out he's just an angry customer. I thought he was a food critic too. I wrote down food critic.
He's not a critic.
But technically, he's an art critic, not a food critic.
Yeah.
That's right. That's where we meet the guy. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. But yeah, he's like, no, but they do go and visit him at his boarding house, and we meet the nice man and his daughter that run the boarding house. And, Laurent makes a comment about this really pretty painting on the wall and how it reminds him of a classical artist and whose name was Montoya, but no worries about it. Makoto is like, okay, I'm going to try going back to that sushi chef. I'm going to apologize. He buys a new capsule toy. This one really is my favorite because I didn't understand it. And I actually had to look up who this guy was. And it's Edward VIII, who was a king of England. And he was kind of controversial in the way he ran things. And he didn't follow rules and he didn't do things right. And this is all per one paragraph from Wikipedia. I am not. Please, if I mess this up, I'm sorry. But according to Wikipedia. And then he wanted to marry someone, but he couldn't. So he abdicated the throne and gave it to his younger brother and was no longer king. Symbolizing this is the arc where our main character is going to try to run a heist, screw it up, and have to turn it back over to the people he doesn't want to work for. I absolutely love that. And it wasn't until after I watched it, I went back and read about Edward VIII, and I'm like, oh, I see how that lines up. That's really cool for this arc, because the first two, it's a little obvious and on the nose, but this one I thought was really cool.
Yeah, because he didn't even understand it. He was like, who is this guy?
Yeah, I need to look him up later.
Yep.
So yeah, like you mentioned, rude guy at the sushi place. He sees him, and then when he goes home that night, his landlords are like, "We're gonna have to sell. We're in huge debt." And he's like, and he hears the same guy from the sushi restaurant talking about how he's gonna buy a painting for someone, and that he's really rich, and he's like, "Oh, okay, that guy's a scumbag. They need money. I know what to do." He calls Cynthia, and he's like, "Hey, I need help. Don't tell Laurent. But I'm going to do a job. I want you guys to come in. Do not tell Laurent." She's like, "Okay, I won't." She hangs up, and Laurent's right there, and it was on speakerphone. He's like, "Well, that was rude." she's like, "No one likes you." Like, fine.
I love how straight Cynthia is with him, too, about that. Like, you are the worst. This is why people don't like you.
Yep.
So Abby and Kudo fly in to help. Basically, he's going to sell this painting from the boarding house.
I love how Abby starts criticizing his script immediately. Like, is this even gonna work? This is dumb.
I really love the scene of him and Abby just hanging out in the city for a day, though, especially after the last episode. And they haven't seen each other since the last arc. Her hair's longer. She's obviously more relaxed, and they're not like best friends or talking a lot, but just the fact that they were relaxed around each other and comfortable around each other was such a huge growth from where we started. And I thought that was really cool that they took the time to show it. But basically the whole plan is they're gonna swindle this guy to buy this dumb, stupid painting for $25,000. And they trick him out of leaving one art place, and they take over another art place, and he comes in. And Cynthia immediately bails. She just walks out. And she's
as soon as she sees him.
Yep. She walks out. She's like, "This is not going to work." And he's like, "Wait, why? What's wrong?" She's like, "He's an art auctioneer. He knows more about art in France than anybody else in the world. This is the worst person you could be doing this to." And he goes up to the painting, and he's like, "You're selling this for $25,000? And Abby's like, "Yes, we're selling it for $25,000. He's like, "I'll buy it." So then they're like, "Hey, we got the money," and Makoto's like, "I'm gonna take the $20,000. The rest is for you guys. I'm gonna take it to the boarding house." And he gives it to them. And then on the news, this guy appears and he's like, "This is worth millions and millions of dollars."
Yeah,
and they're
20
like,
2 million or something like that.
20
million.
20. That's right.
20 million.
They're like, "You're scummy." So Laurent shows up, Cynthia shows up. They're like, "Wow, you really blew that. I can't believe you didn't do research on the target. I can't believe you didn't know what you were doing." And Laurent's like, "Oh, well, I guess we could help you." And Cynthia's like, "Yes, we're going to nail this mofo." And she's drunk. She's drunk most this arc. She's drinking heavily. And so she's like, "I'm going to get him." She does the witch fingers. It was really good. So I'm gonna have to go a little bit fast. The backstory here is that Cynthia was in love with an artist when she was a waitress. They were very poor. She was trying to become an actress. He was trying to become an artist, but he was really good at doing replicas. And this villain, James Coleman, who's the auctioneer who bought the London in Snow or something like that is what it's called. He had discovered him and is like, "You're so good at forgeries that I want you to make forgeries of lost paintings that I can sell as the real ones. And since the real ones are gone, no one will be able to ever know. I'll make a lot of money. I'll make you a lot of money." And I mean, this is played out over 2 episodes and beautiful music. And it's actually done really well. And he wants to marry Cynthia and he needs money to do it. So he goes into this. It and then when his name is Thomas, and when we see him later, he's in ruins, right? He gets way too caught up into it. He's way into being rich, and he tells Cynthia, like, "Don't you get in my way," when she's trying to warn him about, this is the bad path, and she breaks up with him. That's all the flashbacks. In current times, he runs auctions, and whenever he finds a piece of art he really loves, he signals to his lover, this older woman who's super rich, to buy it for him so that he can hoard all his favorite art for himself. And she's totally in love with him, and he's totally using her. And so they're like, we're going to get him to buy the same painting again, but we're going to sell him a fake. So when he...
I love the fact that during this time, they've got edamame painting. And we're supposed to believe, and I was sincerely wondering, I was like, you can't be serious. You think that you're going to have him create, if the show goes in this direction, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And thankfully it didn't, but then part of me wonders, okay, so was that them just playing a joke on edamame? Because there's literally no point in him doing that. Zero. It doesn't benefit them in one way.
It might have
for
been
him to do that.
multiple avenues.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, if we can't talk this dude to doing it, at least he could make a crappy version, and we could surprise him with the crappy version later.
I think she's just messing with him because he messed up and is drunk and got her involved in this. I think she's just punishing him.
Okay.
So when he goes to auction off Stowe of London, which he is very excited about, and he definitely wants his mistress to buy, Laurent comes in and buys it for 30 million instead, and she doesn't go against him. It's too much money for her, and she gets in a lot of trouble from Coleman, who's like, "Oh, the art, goes up in value, and we needed that painting," and yells at her, and she feels so bad. She let the love of her life down. Abby,
he's so amazing, and he's such a specimen.
Yep, Abby becomes the inside man. She keeps pressing for a job with him, and she knows about Laurent, so he hires her to track him down. Of course, she's feeding him fake information. Eventually, he confronts Laurent. Laurent's like, "I'm actually an auctioneer myself. I'm having it appraised because I don't really trust you, and I'm going to have a secret auction, and I'm going to sell it myself. But you know what? I'll invite you. That'll be fair."
I love when she first meets him. It's like, "Mr. Coleman, this creepy man's following me.
He's stalking me."
So now that they have the painting, they need to create a forgery. So they go get Thomas, who we find has been living in squalor, and has hoodlums trying to attack him. They end up attacking Makoto.
He's
Makoto
like 200 mil in debt.
Yeah.
Or no, 2 mil. That's right.
2 mil. Mm-hmm.
And Makoto convinces the hoodlums, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to come with me." And he takes them to the exact same restaurant where Cynthia broke up with him, and Cynthia's there and has bought out the restaurant and is waiting for him, totally burning him at the same time. Like, "Oh, how did your life path go?"
Yes. Ugh.
And she tells him, "I want you to do a forgery for me now." And he's like, "No, I promise I would never do that again." He later tells Makoto, he realized at some point in his life that this was wrong. This is the worst thing. And the reason he's in so much debt is he bought back all the paintings that he forged so that they wouldn't be out there in the art world. And of course, since they were being sold at the real prices, he's hugely in debt.
Mm-hmm.
Makoto shows him a drawing of a diamond ring, which was his "I'm going to propose to you when we have money" to Cynthia. And he's like, "Cynthia has kept this. I stole it from her." But she's cared this whole time. And so Thomas agrees he'll do this. And so he pours his, for days, and he paints this painting. And Makoto tells Cynthia, he didn't do this for the money. He didn't do it to get out of debt. He did this for you. And then the time of the auction comes. Coleman's mistress has liquidated most her assets, so she can afford this. They go there. Everyone else at the auction is, of course, part of the con man team. Laurent starts selling pictures, and whenever Coleman sees a picture, he's like, "Oh, that'll sell for 30,000." And he's like, 150,000, and then it sells up for 300,000, and so showing that prices are jacked up here, and you're just gonna have to get used to it. Yeah. And then they take a break before Snow in London is sold, and they hear Kudo and the old lady within the water filter thing talking about how it's gonna be 70 million. So the lady runs out to call her butler. She's like, I need you to get 20 more million from our assets. We need more money. And he's like, I can't. You have to stop. This is horrible. He's using you. How can you not see this? Also, that Abby girl told me something. And we don't hear what he says. But then Abby comes up to her and hands her a tape recorder. And it's like, you should listen to this. Well, the auction resumes. She doesn't come back. But Cynthia takes her seat next to Coleman.
I love it that she sits right next to him.
Yep. And then the auction resumes, and Coleman starts bidding on it. And then Cynthia starts bidding on it. And they get him up to the 70 million agreed upon price point. And Cynthia bids again. It starts getting, and you can see like every con man in the room is like, what? Wait, what?
And of course, Cynthia's like egging this guy on.
This is punishment for what he did to Thomas. Like, this is now a personal vendetta. And Laurent says the line, "This is why I'm in the business," and there is no more true statement he has made in the entire anime, because he's not talking about auctioneering. He loves this. But yeah,
I don't remember him saying that in the sub.
Yeah, he did.
He says, "This is why I'm in the business."
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so she gets him up to 100 million.
Yeah.
And he wins the auction. And then Laurent comes to him. He's like, okay, well, we need the money. And he's like, well, my partner is coming with the money. And they're like, well, we've been waiting, and you've called her multiple times, and she's not coming. And he shows him he's like, well, as long as you transfer the funds. And so this guy sends all his personal funds into this bank account to get the painting. So the plan works, and then they take the painting back to the house that Makoto was staying in, and he's like, guys, I have to tell you something. This is the forgery. He's like, I love the forgery so much. He put so much heart and soul into it. I couldn't do it. And they're like, oh, I guess then we didn't swindle him. We just sold him a really expensive painting.
Yeah, we're not con artists. We're just art dealers.
But we do see Coleman at the gate of his mistress, like, will you buy this from me, please? I'll give it to you half price. He's desolate. And then she's in her mansion listening to the tape recording of him saying, like, I'm just using that old hag, and flirting with Abby. And the butler, like, takes the tape recorder and breaks it. And it's not, I was like, oh, you're going to bang your butler now. Cool. Good for you.
Similar age. You've been together a long time.
Yeah, so there is still a con, but the con was on taking away his money source, not what they sold him. They did, sell him the real painting.
Well, and conned him out of $100 million.
Yeah.
And then Makoto tells Cynthia, you got to finish this. So she goes and she has coffee with Thomas at where they had first met. They talk, they say goodbye, and she goes and throws the paper ring into the river. And I really like this, that it wasn't like they're going to get back together, everything is fixed, but it gave them both closure on a horrible ending. That was a really mature way to handle a relationship like that.
Yeah.
No, I really like that.
And then it ends with Makoto goes back to the sushi restaurant to get his job back, but now it's a Thai food place. And they're like, we already have a Thai guy. We don't need you no more.
Because they called him Korean at first.
Yeah. We don't need a Korean to help us here because we have 3 Thai guys. He's like, I'm not Korean.
And then the final scene is Cynthia and Laurent back at the beach, and she points out, you knew what that painting was from the beginning. You knew he was screwing that up from the beginning. You watched all of us go through this just to see what would happen. He's like, yeah, basically. And then he's like, you want me to draw you? She's like, you are such an a-hole. And she walks away. And then we see the blue diamond from the ending, and he's talking to someone. I'm guessing that has to do with his and the next
Dolly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's how this ends. Any thoughts on the last heist?
I liked the last one much better than the other two. I liked Abby's story better. But this felt mature. This felt a bit more cat and mouse. And I thought they did a little better explaining and showing the scenes of how they were setting up the heists than the other two.
I thought the relationship between the old lady and the villain was also really interesting. It was very different from the other two. In both of the cases of the other two, they were like participants that were directly benefiting from the cash flow. Whereas in this one, what she was getting was a facade of love, and to her that mattered more than money. And so that was an interesting relationship that the two of them had, and how she was dependent in some ways and he was dependent in others to get what he wanted and was taking advantage of her. And then just the tragic relationship, and like you guys said, having that mature ending to it, which was really satisfying. But at the same time, you know, I would have loved to have seen them get back together, just from the perspective of like they both could, but they've made so many decisions now in their lives that it would be very difficult.
Yeah, my thought was that Cynthia's just really is too different from who she was back then.
Yeah.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
I don't think Thomas would have been able to accept her, because Thomas kind of dealt with his past and like went straight and narrow-ish. And she's just like, yeah, I'm con woman now. So
I'm a confident.
That was one thing that I found really weird, was like, we don't know what happened between the moment where she walked out and started, between that moment and when she started her con career. Like you said, Troy, we've only gotten part of her story, but with him, we know exactly what happened from that meal. He basically, before he finished his fourth painting, he went out and he realized, oh man, Cynthia was right. I don't want to do this. I'm going to buy everything back. But I don't know whether it was his ego or what, or shame, that he didn't want to contact her. And so I just thought that was very interesting, because that maybe that choice was what actually led her to being a con woman. Because if she had realized that, oh man, he agrees with me, he understands, and he's trying to write this, I don't think they would have stayed broken up, and I don't think she would have pursued her career. Of course, this is all just conjecture, but I don't know, there's a lot to think about with this one, compared to the other two arcs. I think there's a lot more meat on the bone, and you get to kind of play with it in your head. And yeah, and like you said, Jason, with the cat and mouse, that was, to me, way better than having like, okay, well, this formula falls into place here and here and here. With this, it was just all coming to pieces left and right. And
yeah, way more social engineering with this one, which
Yeah.
I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, who was so you said that each arc had a villain and then like a benefiter of the villain, but a good person. Who was that? Thomas in this one for you?
No, for me, that was the woman. So she was
Okay.
benefiting because she believed that he loved her,
Okay.
and love was more important. Yep.
Okay. All right, let's go to our final review. Jeremy, what'd you give it?
I've been thinking about it a lot, and I have to give it a 4. There's a lot of things that I don't like, but they're kind of surface level, you know, and when it comes to the story and it comes to the way that they handled the formulas and the way that they handled the character development, I'm really impressed. I also think it's a little bit unfair because it is 14 episodes, and you can do a lot with 14 episodes if you don't waste them. And there are other anime that have, you know, we've watched them waste episodes where they could have devoted them to some, you know, useful cause. So I don't know. It's kind of a toss up where like, yeah, it's unfair because they have 14 episodes, but at the same time, they didn't waste those 14 episodes. They used them really well. So I've got to give them a 4 out of 5. I'm impressed.
Okay, Jason, what about you?
For me, it was, I did enjoy the last arc. I didn't really get attached to the characters until the last arc. And you know, the heists were okay. For me, it's really middle of the road, so I'm going to go to 3. It wasn't like super impressive, but it wasn't boring. So
A 3 for me as well. No, I'm kidding. It's a 5. A very biased 5. I conned you. See what I did there?
You did. You conned us.
oh
Double
man,
cross.
crisscross.
I'll list some reasons though. I found not only is it a really unique genre for anime. This is not something I've ever seen an anime tackle. So that's a big selling point for me. That's always will be. But I do think they made some really cool story choices with a character who has multiple character arcs, time skips in between each story arc, and just really fun characters. So I really liked all that. Plus, again, all the bias stuff, jazz, cons, heist. That's me in a nutshell. That's the kind of stuff I love to watch. I watched every season of Leverage. That's who this was made for me. So it's not a very objective 5, and I recognize that, but it is a 5 for me. And now I get to finally go watch Mother's Basement video about this anime because I've had to wait all this time. One of the reasons I picked it is because he made a video. I was like, okay, well, if he made a video, then Jeremy and Jason should at least, there should be something for them.
Right.
Okay, and then, so going on to our next anime, it's going to be ReZero Season 2.
Yes!
Life in Another World. Normally, the rules that we apply on ourselves for this podcast is we only do an anime twice at most, 2 episodes at most. ReZero is the exception that proves the rule just because it's so near and dear to our hearts. It's been in our podcast since the beginning. We've even redone the first season in preparation for this, so everyone should have known this was coming. No, this does not mean we're going to watch every season of My Hero Academia or Boruto or anything like that. That's not going to happen.
It's not Boruto.
Mm-mm.
Inuyasha has a new show. The Children of
I'm
Inuyasha.
curious about that. I'm curious about that one.
Anyway, ReZero Season 2. The 13 episodes, we'll be watching that, and that'll be our next anime pick.
And we realized that the next half of season 2 is not coming out until 2021, but I'm not waiting that long. So
No. This has been hard enough to wait this long because,
Yes.
you know, you pop onto videos on YouTube just to watch anything and people are making references. There's memes that are popping up now. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I want to know, but I don't want to know.
And
Everyone's talking about the waifus, and I'm like, I don't know all the waifus
Yes,
anymore.
no.
and fair enough, when that does come out in 2021, I'm picking it again.
Good. Yes.
And also, like, we're one of the people who helped convince Gamer Dad, one of our listeners, to watch ReZero, and he's been watching season 2 and commenting on it. I'm like, I have to wait. I want to talk about it too. All right, let's go on to our no, we did that part. If you would like to comment on
We're
the
professionals here.
Great Pretender,
Yeah.
I am a confidence man. If you will have a comment on Great Pretender or any other anime we watch, you can reach us on our Twitter at Baka Podcast, or email the animebakaclub@gmail.com, or leave a comment wherever you found this podcast, and we'll get back to you. You guys want to sing Great Pretender with me to the outro?
Thanks for listening.
My needs are
Next
such
time.
I pretend. Okay, sayonara.